And welcome to Get the Table. We are the Dudley Boys of What Culture, here to talk about how Triple H became the GOAT. You see, there was a big conversation on social media over the weekend, sort of about Triple H's legacy and where he stands in the whole GOAT conversation. Where does he sit for you?
Not very high up, but I guess that's the point, right? That was the chat that was going on. Some would say there's probably 100 or more better wrestlers than Triple H. Some did, and that's why we're here to do this, because you can absolutely think about this in a multitude of different ways. I would say, before we get into a bit of a deeper dive on this, nobody benefited more from the WWE's ability when they had the monopoly in the palm of their hands before it slipped away to just basically tell you what wrestling history was. And indeed tell you what wrestling present was, but especially tell you what wrestling history was. The more WWE leaned into the sort of, or got towards the later end of the 2000s, and were just, TNA wasn't a competition, New Japan wasn't really yet on the rise in the West, all those sort of things. They had complete control over generations of fans' takes on pro wrestling before they'd even seen it. So if you were tuning into WWE then, and you were new to it, or you were a casual fan or whatever, it was just sort of received wisdom that Triple H was one of the best. He himself would tell you about the Attitude Era, how the kind of guys like me, Austin and Rock, you know, and then like Shawn Michaels would be there actually doing it. And it's like, well, he's kind of the same as Shawn because they're both in DX. Like, the million different ways WWE did it were always centered around a select few. And one of those select few, because they needed him to be perceived that way, was Triple H. And I kind of think that's held firm today. I look forward to diving into the matches that I loved that Triple H has had. There just aren't many of them, right? And I think the bad has always outweighed the good with him as a pro wrestler. And that was what informed this debate most of all, was him as a pro wrestler.
Yeah, I've not really been fair with the top there. I've called it how Triple H became the GOAT. It's more how he became seen as the GOAT because of what Hamlet said there and the way, that's sort of part of what the conversation was online, right, Sige, in terms of people's frame of reference. If you've been watching for 30, 40 years, it's very different to if you've been watching, like you say, in that time period, or the way, or what you've consumed as well.
Indeed, look, Paul Levesque is the best in the world at one thing, and that is, it sounds like such a 2003 message board pilled take, but that doesn't make it any less true. He's the best in the world at one thing, and that's politics. But he is, and it's a genuine skill.
Look where we are now.
Yeah, look where we are now, sat on this table discussing the guy who runs it all, who wanted to run it all from day one. And, you know, look where we are. Yeah, we'll get into it with various sort of sub-questions and the like. But for me, Paul Levesque is incredible at politics, and he knew exactly how to get positioned in that sort of role that he occupied for a very, very, very long time. Longevity has got, a part of it. He got himself in the room. He put himself in a position where he then had the ability to win matches he wanted to win, not lose matches he didn't fancy losing, get in main events, get premium WrestleMania slots. Not all of it had to do with his ability.
Yeah, I'm sort of a perfect case study for this in terms of, like, he's never been one of my favorites, but he was quite often across the ring from one of my favorites. So I hold him in this high regard because, like you say, I came in around that perfect 2001 era of WWE, WWF, of course, prior to that. And, you know, I dipped out. I wasn't there for the Reign of Terror, so I wasn't, like, just...
You and plenty others, and I mean, that's part of the conversation, right?
But you and your friend Mark stopped watching.
Indeed. But then, like you say, when I come back, I'm like, oh, is Triple H still going? And he's doing these big matches every year at WrestleMania, and he's setting them up for himself, whether it be at Survivor Series or Royal Rumble or whatever, or he's saying, oh, God, I suppose I'll have to take the world title into Mania to get Roman over. You know, whatever it may be.
You have to now.
But it's also, I suppose, do you think it's also shaped somewhat by, A, people's perception of him now, literally right now, and also prior to that, his NXT legacy? Absolutely.
I want to say a lot of positive things about Triple H, the wrestler, at the front end of this video, because I don't want people to just tune in and be like, there they are, the ones that were super cynical about him the other day being super cynical about him all over again, right? I earnestly believe a lot of people earnestly feel that way about Triple H, and you mentioned 2000, 2001. I wrote an article years ago that we're kicking around our archives called That Damn Good for One Damn Year. And the point I wanted to get at was, for such a long career, he simply doesn't have the matches. But for one intense and money-drawing period of time, where lots of people did jump on, where lots of people did watch, he was incredible. He was the best in the world, I think, across all of pro wrestling for a short period of time. And there's a lot to be said for that. Not many wrestlers do that. And he did that, right? Regardless of anything else, for a bit, it was his domain, right? He was the game, was a catchphrase he was able to live up to. He had a very Insecure t-shirt that said, "Game over, you damn right I'm over." But he was, right? He really was. Best heel in the industry, was primed twice to be the best babyface in the industry, and kind of bottled it because he loved being a heel that much. I'm talking January 2000 to the quad injury. I don't think anyone could touch him as an all-rounder.
Yeah.
And WWE was on fire, and he was at the center of all that, and you just simply can't take all that away. Now, the wrestlers he wrestled, you didn't mention him by name, but you talk about The Rock, right? Yeah. He was across from The Rock. He was made by Mick Foley. He was eventually begrudgingly put over by Steve Austin. He was working with Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and countless names from the era that were just seen as the very, very best. And like, that didn't hurt. You know, that roster that gets spoken of like an all-timer roster.
I was going to say 2008. That was stacked.
You could pull out 3 pages of a magazine front cover, not enough
to eat that, yeah.
So yes, I have heard that argument before, that when you list all the great matches, you list opponents that weren't any slouches either, right?
Yeah.
But it takes two to tango, and I would argue that at that point, he was actually in most of those matches the biggest star going at the work rate matches. So he was elevating those by the virtue of them being in the ring with him, which again is something that he didn't do long term, but he had in that hot minute. And the thing about that run, and what makes me saddest of all, beyond the fact that he twice bottled the babyface turn, was that what was the pink slime of Ghostbusters 2 underneath Triple H's career was this insecurity, right? He was insecure, like, fair enough, he got to WWE and he got in the driver's seat of the Clicks van, right? And he was always insecure in his spot when he was gradually rising up the card, because he looked around and he saw people maybe that were on his level or a little bit better. He was insecure when he was suddenly head-to-head with The Rock.
Oh, yeah.
In about 3 different eras, actually. He was insecure when he was stood next to Shawn Michaels. And it was like, we're kind of the same in DX, aren't they? Right, Shawn? You're not, pal.
No.
He was kind of insecure when he was the leader of DX, and you could argue the Outlaws were more over and X-Pac was a better worker and all that sort of stuff. And it, like, was it really China that kind of got him over the hump in the first place? And then when he finally made it, 2000, finally, like, undisputed top guy, he was then insecure about how far he should put over a Kurt Angle, or should he turn heel, turn babyface, whatever. I wish in that time he had like lapped up the plaudits more than he evidently did, because when he came back in 2002, that pop's real. I might not like it. Yeah, I might not like it, but that's real. That pop is money. It's reflective of a house that was excited to see him, and indeed a sold-out Madison Square Garden, bought a ticket.
And that's key as well.
Yeah.
It's MSG. He'd made it in front of the legendary, like, discerning taste makers.
Drew the sold-out house, Madison Square Garden, that were there to see him, received him as this massive star, and look at the body. Look at the body first, look at the body of work second. Neither long-term were able to live up to just how people felt for him emotionally and financially that night. And I wish, so many times in Triple H's career, I wish he wasn't as insecure as he was. But that specific hotspot is the one. I wish that rehab was intense as out. He wanted to get back for WrestleMania and he did it. But I wish the rehab was more about wanting to get back to the spot he'd finally earned, rather than made himself massive and everything was like a decline from there. The insecurity has constantly been Triple H's undoing, and to some that see it, like myself and I imagine Sidgwick, he just wears it on his sleeve. A lot don't see it, but once you do, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, he's someone you will hear so many stories about, and it's, I don't know whether you'd say it affects his legacy of his in-ring work, but yeah, the amount of times you hear someone saying, I was doing really well, and then someone said, I'm not sure about this guy, and we all know who they're talking about.
Yeah, of course, you know, he throttled many a push. He was synonymous with the worst of WWE for so goddamn long. Just the insecurity was absolutely staggering at various points.
I always remember you pointing out to me, I can't remember who it was, you'll probably remember it more than I do. He gets pinned in a match, and instead of it being like, is it Jeff?
It's Jeff Hardy.
It's him who loves this one.
Oh, sorry.
Ahead of him getting a shot at the world title. When I think about all the years that Triple H had basically killed guys with sledgehammers to get world title shots, Jeff Hardy pins him in a number one contenders match, right? And it's a proper 1, 2, 3, 3.1 shoulder up. And Jeff like rolls out the ring to celebrate the trademark, celebrating the floor deal, and Triple H right down the lens of the hard camera. It's like, well, you were putting guys in the hospital. You orchestrated a year-long plan with Rikishi to get Austin out of the way, and now it's like, you got me.
Every dog has his day, I guess.
Yeah, because he knew. Shrewd political operator. And we're not just. The thing is, I think some people would say, you get people become obsessed with like the wrongdoings, supposed political wrongdoings of a Triple H, but it is tied to the wrestling. It is tied to the work because if he had a bit more faith in himself at his peak, or he accepted nobody's perfect. If he accepted his flaws past his peak, he still could have been up there. He still could have been great. He had much to offer in smaller doses as the years went by, but it was always about never making Triple H look weak, ideally making him look strong at other people's expense. For God's sake, do not put a video game advert where I'm getting hit.
I mean, that's the quintessential Triple H story. If you are unfamiliar with it, there was a directive to not portray the digital render of Triple H in a position of weakness or getting pinned. And correct me if I'm wrong, was it Fighting Spirit magazine?
Yes, I think so. That revealed it.
They put the picture in.
Oh, yeah,
revealed it, and it was a big sort of thing. Didn't want to look weak. His digital render couldn't even look like. And when you become aware of this sort of insecurity in a wrestler, it's not just, they're insecure, so what, I can, look at their watch their character on TV or whatever. Once you kind of become aware, and you don't know these people, right, but you get an idea of how they tick, when you become aware of what that person is like, it's that weird, sort of position wrestling occupies, the between the lines. And I've used this as a way of, it ruins certain wrestlers for you. There's a AEW wrestler, it's Dax Harwood. When you know how much he seems to love having this body of work, and he probably should be proud of it. It's excellent. Yeah. Oh, yeah. When you know that, he sometimes goes on Twitter and says, well, the rankings can change. And he'll say, here's my top 5 matches that I've ever worked. The rankings can change, but I'm proud of this one the most this week. No other wrestler seems to do that. In fact, a lot of other wrestlers will be perfectionists and say, oh God, I can never watch my stuff back, or I made a mistake in that match. And it's very often that wrestler who will, Dax, who will say, oh no, this is my... When you know how much he seems to enjoy being an acclaimed wrestler, and then you say, all right, did that need to go an hour? Did you need those 5 minutes of near falls? Or are you in fact kind of desperately trying to do that epic by doing that length of a match? It does sort of inform your perception of that wrestler. And number one with a bullet of, I cannot watch you the same way, knowing what little I know about you. It's Triple H and that insecurity.
With regards to his legacy, do you think it's sort of looked back on now with maybe a bit of rose-tinted glasses because of what he's gone on to do? Because
certainly he's the biggest babyface to WWE fans of all time, probably at this point. He's made them truly fallen back in love with this thing, and it's wild. It's so wild to me when in 2019, the year where it was probably the easiest to just very much criticize WWE and say, that's bad. At the time, he couldn't do that with certain WWE fans because they would just say, you're biased about AEW or you're biased towards New Japan. And he'd say, no, I'm fairly certain this is the worst WWE or in fact, wrestling at large has ever been, okay? And at the time, it was like, can't criticize that. Then apparently, Shelton Benjamin going like that is goated and it's generational cooking. The wild card rule was Scorsese couldn't do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now that Levesque has genuinely done an exceptional job of ascertaining what it is his audience wants and doing a lot of really solid, even great booking. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but in terms of effectiveness, it's undeniable. Jey Uso, Gunther, Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, LA Knight. There's so many acts that are just really, really over. The ticket sales speak for themselves, right? So obviously, because Levesque has just made people fall back in love with WWE again. You make a great point. He's the biggest babyface alive to these people. That's why he goes out there. And because he's insecure and he wants to pop himself. And is sort of the mascot. It is the Paul Levesque era. Even Vince didn't call it a Vince era when he, you know what I mean? So that does, people love him, and I think they'll go back and have their memories of him. Are we going to do the bit now where we say, he's not the GOAT because, or he could be considered the GOAT.
Yeah, they would
don't want to crap on him. And then be a little bit nice.
Yeah, because we're going to talk about where he sort of ranks with that. It's funny as well how...
Like 208.
Arguably, his a bit like his in-ring career, his NXT legacy is a bit like that. People sort of forget the latter stages of it and remember. You wrote a book on NXT, of course.
I wish to correct that. They don't forget it. They didn't watch it and lie. That's
Good
what
point,
happened. We did. Right?
We knew.
And it fell off badly. Badly fell off. Booker's have runs and his ended, and yet he continued on for a few more years.
Because he was doing the thing that was the obvious thing to do, i.e., well, don't just do the PWG alternative to what was, mainstream at the time.
I want to go into the GOAT case now.
Yeah, go on.
Don't mind. Why he isn't, why he might be considered, right? Why he isn't, right? If you look at wrestlers who are, this is mainly in terms of big matches. A lot of it gets talked about in big matches, and you could have a separate debate, which we don't really have time for here, about what makes the GOAT. But in terms of that big match catalogue of drawing, interest, if you're the thing about Triple H is a main event level wrestler, okay, and he put himself in that spot for years and years and years and years and years and years on end. So I mean, as a promo, I mean, he wasn't succinct. But he's about as succinct as I am, right?
Yeah, minutes in the ring, he's right up there.
He's not succinct as a promo.
Here's the thing, I'm the GOAT.
Yeah, he wasn't that. So as a promo, I could not stomach all of those lengthy ones at all. So as a big match worker, right, the GOAT, you have to have the big matches, and it's usually centered around main event workers, right? So this is my way into it. Mm-hmm. If you think of other wrestlers not named Paul Levesque who are in that conversation, and it's different people as well, obviously, but greatest of all time, right? Bryan Danielson. Mm-hmm. Can you count on one hand the amount of main event duds, just outright duds? And, it's not really possible to talk about it on a subjective level, an objective level, but in terms of did people in that building or that stadium or that arena, if it's not to your tastes, did that light an arena on fire, right? No, it didn't. It stunk it out. No one cared, right? Bryan Danielson. AJ Styles, Royal Rumble 2019.
Yep.
He had a match with Jericho. Was it All Out 2022?
Yeah.
In AEW. Maybe he went...
Kane...
Kane doesn't count. Kane doesn't count. God damn it!
Like with wrestlers that should have been good, like with matches that should have been good. So.
Yeah. Two there. Maybe if you go back and watch some of his big ROH title matches, maybe follow your view thing. He probably went a little bit too long. Okay. I could like Kenny Omega, Revolution 2021. But the finish really destroys everything. Well, that's it. Your pillars, Misawa, Kobashi, they were just cycled down towards the end. Did Misawa stink out Budokan once? Did he? No, he didn't. I
was trying to think of Austin when you said
Austin's
that.
had some, some of the Taker matches.
Taker was pretty bad. I didn't like Jericho. Him and Jericho No Way Out was pretty bad. But not a lot. Not a lot. He did kind of...
The Rock in the main event, I mean, he couldn't do anything with Mr. Ass or the Bulldog, but other than that...
His headline spots, he doesn't...
That's my pick.
Yeah. He doesn't... Yeah.
Yeah. If you look... And the only person, this is going to really sit well with the WWE fans when I say this take, the only person who rivals Triple H for that just body of stinkers is The Undertaker. Sorry. Right.
They've shared a few.
Right. Undertaker versus Triple H, King of the Ring, 2002.
Yeah.
Horrible. Yeah. Absolutely horrible. Right. Triple H versus Goldberg, Scott Steiner, Booker T, Randy Orton, WrestleMania 25. Brock Lesnar.
Not the way they presented in that documentary.
Brock.
They shared the Hogan Rock footage. Everyone's loving this.
Brock Lesnar, WrestleMania 29. Roman Reigns, WrestleMania 32.
Maybe the worst for me. Or like an awful experience.
Like a lot of terrible, big pay-per-view matches with Randy Orton, like in general, brackets general. Like there's like Batista, WrestleMania 35, had no goddamn right to go 25 minutes. It was longer than Brian Kofi. Yeah. Even Seth Rollins, WrestleMania 33, considering how much time WWE invested in Triple H and Rollins after that spring 2014. I know he was injured for a long time, but it was going to be a 2-year, or at least a 1-year. Gentleman's 3. It was fine. It'll never get remembered as a classic WrestleMania match.
What about if we did the Indian Deathlock on the floor?
Yeah, that makes it more brutal. The amount of really silent, deathly silent, no one cares matches at SummerSlam against Brock when he tried to cry afterwards. Yeah. Tedious, silent library matches that people in these arenas didn't care about. It's kind of staggering, and it's almost evidence that the principle of karma exists. If you put yourself in that position, people have to care about you. They didn't. Oh, but guess what? Tough titties. It's a monopoly. I've got an ego. I want to be in those matches. I'm going to put myself in those matches. It's overwhelming in terms of, even if you like those matches personally, and you're well within your rights to do that, they're not hits in that building. There's a certain point where that subjectivity, objectivity argument, it can go both ways. You can say, it's up to me. I'm in charge. It's my opinion. I think Brock Lesnar versus Triple H at WrestleMania 29 was really, really good, right? Or you could go to the other end of that extreme and say, right, if it's all subjective, I would like to hear the argument that Gable Stevenson's a better wrestler than Bryan Danielson. Yeah. Or someone who's been doing it for a really long time. Mideon is a better wrestler than Bryan Danielson. I mean, that's ridiculous, but subjectively, you could say that. So I understand that the whole argument is flawed. In terms of how those arenas and stadiums reacted to so many big Triple H matches, it's like, is that what they want? Or did Pat Patterson, the architect of the WWF, if you're not saying Vince McMahon, if Pat Patterson says that the whole idea behind all of this, his famous phrase was, make them go banana. Make them go banana. Did Triple H make them go banana about 50 times in huge main events? No, he goddamn didn't, right? And one of the reasons, this is before I go into what I think Triple H was really actually almost exceptional, outstanding at, right? One of the reasons why I think so many of those duds happened as they did is rooted in the idea of the contempt that a lot of old wrestling heads had for the audience, or the marks that Triple H has used that phrase before. When they say, slow it down, tell a story. I don't necessarily believe that, that's the way to tell a story. There's a million stories you can tell in pro wrestling. I think it's rooted in the idea that, they won't be able to catch up. You've got to slow it down for these thicko marks.
Dumb it down.
Dumb it down, slow it down. I think it's genuinely, it stems from that mentality of slow it down, you got to tell a story. It's like these marks won't be able to, I honestly think, and I think he has that attitude, and it's on television when he's barely playing an exaggerated version of himself, unless he wants a fruit basket from Reddit, and then he'll get the fastest wrestlers in the land, okay? Which is true.
Yeah. He books for noise. He books for banana. He's got all of his baby faces people go absolutely nuts for.
When he realised where it was all going, he got some of the fastest, most intricate matches on a takeover ever. Yeah. Why didn't you work them? It's just, that is the ultimate thing for me as a GOAT. It's like the amount of times an arena fell silent as he did his thing. Shawn Michaels' Bad Blood 2004. Oh, God. I don't know if that's worse than the Lesnar match, because at least the Lesnar match was like...
I think it's one of his all-time worst, that Bad Blood match.
I mean, it's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. You can't have that many stinkers and be considered the GOAT. And it's not just me saying I was a bit bored by it and I don't like that slow, deliberate, methodical pace. The arena didn't. No one seemed to.
The Nash won the year before until Mick Foley took a bump for them.
Yeah.
Randy Orton, WrestleMania 25. I mean, it's absolutely atrocious. And if you can say, all right, okay, well, they got the step wrong. That Lesnar match at 29 is a debacle, an absolute debacle. What Levesque was great at, right? He was an unbelievable bumper. He was unbelievable at that balance between. That's when the methodical, deliberate pace actually paid off, because he was so good at just being in complete control. Like, people talk about a heat sequence, and it's just a part of a match. He drew heat. He built the idea of, especially with that frame he had in 2000, of like really setting this pace to the point that when he starts to bump and the babyface comes back, in terms of those sheer fundamentals of get the heat, then start selling for that shine, when he actually wanted to, and he applied himself, light switch, like a total light. Like, I know it's a meme. He had an unbelievable snap.
Yeah, he did.
Unbelievable snap. Another thing he was exceptional at was selling in a submission. Like, he flailed around as if he was in total danger of losing that match, and it was intensely dramatic. In some ways, he was his own worst enemy, because when he was on, and when he was willing, and when he wasn't so insecure, and when he wasn't about to pin CM Punk at Night of Champions before the interference, when he was the heel, which was that's almost too transparent. That thing at the start I said about him being a politician, it's like, it can't be that good if I can see it. If the fans, you know what I mean? He did the visual pin pretty much against CM Punk in that. It's a joke. The thing about like Triple H as well is like, he's obviously had the know-how of how to put a great match together. He just so often had this contempt for the audience, as I slowed down for those thickos, a contempt for the audience, and an insecurity just completely ruined everything. Like, it really did. Like, he had the visual pin on CM Punk. Am I remembering that right?
Oh, no, yeah,
he pretty much did. It's like,
he beat him.
He pretty much beat him. Oh, would have won that if it was that bloody awesome truth.
No, he beat him.
And he beat him, but like, he beat him before, before he could excuse it with the schmoz.
Yeah, sorry, no, he'd done it clean before it happened, you know.
It's just like, he's not just a guy who has contempt for the audience. He's not just a guy who, quite frankly, was just boring sometimes on his own terms. He was an actively cruel saboteur. He knew how to make people look bad, and often did, to put himself above that level. Like, he wasn't just boring, wasn't just sometimes a bit overrated. He was actively, and it's not just me on the message boards when I was a teenager doing the same thing everybody else said. The evidence, like, look at what he did with Goldberg. That match against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 32, and what he did in the build, he's like, I'll get a pop from doing suck it. He's trying to get him over, or are you? Yeah. Anyway, you can talk.
It's just on the point about him being his own worst enemy. The examples Sidgwick's given there are the things he was exceptional at. We're making guys, and his record for making guys is abysmal, and that's what makes you a goat.
But he can do it.
He can do it, and you would what? And it was I lived through that period where, for a split second, he's got me thinking a relative, not a newcomer to WWE, but Rikishi was a new gimmick. He's like, Jesus Christ, I'll receive Rikishi as a main event for the rest of this year, because in January Triple H has given him the showing of his life. I'll watch a Raw match and think, yeah, I know they always bring the Brooklyn Brawler out as a bit of a joke, but is he about to beat him?
Yeah.
Like, Taka Michinoku can still gew, and Triple H is showing you that he can still gew. Like, I will never forget the feeling of, like, it's a sort of, it's one specific thing, and I think Sidge is very, like, he's done such a great job of articulating this is never a specific thing with Triple H. There are 100 examples, but it's one that always springs to mind to me when I think about it. The reality bulldozing the fiction, and what brilliant fiction it was, of the summer 2000 love triangle between Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Kurt Angle. Was very
got his own way again.
Very online by that point, right? And you're watching the match and you're thinking, this is nowhere near as good as it should be. I've watched Kurt Angle kick ass all year. The best rookie thing is not work. Triple H is in the form of his life.
The form of most people's lives in 2000.
And so this should be perfect. And we've talked on podcasts before. It's an awful feeling. Well, why is this not clicking? Oh, God, why is this not clicking, right? So that's bad enough. The match isn't clicking. And then you realise in the aftermath, when Stephanie is chosen and she's chosen Triple H, it's like, well, as a company, you got that ending wrong. And then it takes 5 minutes of reading to realise the multiple reasons why that went wrong. Because Triple H thought there's no way she picks that geek drinking his milk over this badass, right? That's actually what happened. So that's what's got mixed up in the finish. Kurt's fine. He's going to want to win the belt next month, so he can take that out. So he's killed something there. He's kind of broke all our hearts a little bit. But then also you watch the match back and it's like, well, what Triple H has done is orchestrated a finish that has suited him, and he's worked backwards and thought, well, now I need to work the match that suits the finish, which is me kind of being dominant at various points over Kurt Angle, because then I don't look like a bear. If Kurt's like had my life with all of his like pro wrestling, like amateur/pro wrestling stuff, then I won't look like a convincing badass when she picks the badass, right? So he would even do it in a way where it's like, well, I don't really want it that way, but if we're going with that finish, who suggests the finish? Can't remember. But if we're going with that finish, the match going to have to be that way as well. Like the Batista thing. Remember, right? Remember 2019 Raw, said you said it. Remember how we would come in the studio and then once in blue moon, there was just one thing we loved and you just couldn't wait to get in and talk about Raw. Like it almost never happened. The Ric Flair beatdown, we could not wait how it was shot.
That was so well done.
We put over Bruce Pritchard's production of it. Like, this is different gravy. Batista has come back, resenting 2014, resenting Evolution. He's an actor, and he's better than all of you, and he's going to make you scared. And then Triple H is like, well, I'll tape up the fist, but, like, I'm in trouble here against Batista. We get to the match. Wah, wah, I've got his nose piercing. Am I right, guys? Like, it's like, you're making it up as you go along then. Yeah. Sting.
Sting, don't get me started.
Right, the babyface vigilante, the one guy that can stop the Authority because they've lost this match and they've come back anyway. Sting's the guy that did this once before with the NWO, so you can hold him in the rafters and he'll do it again. No, he won't. It's the Monday Night Wars. Like, hey, I beat you and your friends, the New World Order. Excuse me? Like,
I know.
But again, that's that sort of idea. Like, we've got this brilliant idea. It's going to be DX and the NWO and things like, well, the last like 6 months stuff. Yeah, but if we're doing that, it probably needs to be me winning, doesn't it? Like, there's a gazillion examples.
You went to WrestleMania 30. How confident were you that Brian was going to even be in the main event of
That's almost the beauty. Almost the beauty of Triple H is that because his reputation precedes him and it's richly earned, he'll always give you that shred of doubt. And he did a lot of jobs. There's a way to do a job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't do much for Roman Reigns. He did the job for Bryan. He did the job properly for Bryan.
The Reign of Terror is worse because the jobs he does are all the wrong ones. He'll take losses on TV that you never remember and win it in the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
He put like Booker T over a couple of times and nobody talks about it because WrestleMania 19
he's
was one that
clever.
actually mattered. Like he did that all the time.
Very prescient guy.
Say again?
I remember there was a Shelton pin on a random Raw.
Couple of like
proper like, what's just happened, Rick?
Yeah.
It's really good. I distinctly remember that watching that as a kid.
He was just got in his own way.
Guys are just not made. Like you remember that dreadful WWE Raw anniversary show that they held at WWF New York, The World, and it was awards. They were all getting these awards. Triple H and Stephanie got one for like, where's Kyopo? Because they were broken up on screen, but whatever. And they do this bit on stage where like Stephanie says, well, for old time's sake, and she smacks his ass, right? That entire thing existed because it was locker room hubbub at the time. Oh, you're going out there with Triple H? He never shows any ass. So he got his ass out at the show. And it's like, is this where we are now? You can take a joke that's being told about you and you're reminding them that they are your subordinates. So get ready for more jobs. Like...
So,
Paul London and Brian Kendrick, we could make a great trio. We could.
Or kick your ass. I'll kick the crap out your ass.
You never come back.
Because I'm the ass kicker.
you mentioned this. You did a list of 100 wrestlers better than Triple H. Where genuinely does he rank?
We were going through
that was
the
a
100.
bit facetious, and I think some people just I took it seriously.
Well, that's the thing, right?
You were
like,
very.
We're behind the curtains, and Murray came to us. Fun idea, but me and Sid both gave each other a look. We're effing here. We can get there as a shoot, right? And you can. And this is the point, right? I think a load of people in that big X conversation / fight were just speaking the truth. Some people think he's the best ever. Some people think he's the worst ever, and that's Triple H.
He'd probably be in my top 100 purely because I've got quite a limited range to go from. Like, I don't know Japanese wrestling.
I don't think he'd make mine. I genuinely don't.
I don't think he would make mine. But again, a lot of that is his own fault.
100's not that many.
It's not that many if you really think about it. And everything we've discussed here, as I'd like to think our viewers and listeners can tell, is coming from a place of passion. And a lot of that's been passionately disliking Triple H for 30 years. Like that, and you can't shake that off. No. I often think and watch the 2000 stuff to remember what I liked before I embrace the hate, as it were, because there is just so much more of the hate to go around when it comes to Triple H. Karma's a fun one. He has done absolutely fine with his life. He will not care that some idiot Mr. Bean-looking asses are going on the internet and saying he was rubbish. He won't care one bit, right? He will be...
He might.
Well, like, for all his insecurities, he will be secure in his legacy because he will continue to tell people it, whether they've asked for it or not. You know, he had a better Iron Man match than Shawn Michaels, and he should bloody love that because, you know, like there's not many other things he's got over his best mate, but he's got that.
I just quite low down. Like, the peaks, unbelievable. Cactus Jack, Bryan Danielson.
Him and The Rock was a proper...
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You needed Triple H. The Rock was in Austin's spot, and you needed Triple H. Now, Triple H needed Mick Foley to be Triple H, but, you know.
SummerSlam 2002, people talk about it as, rightly so, as this unbelievable, borderline, should they be doing this, sell job on the part of Shawn Michaels, where it felt transgressive, where they crafted this sense of transgressive violence and true agony so well that you wanted to suspend your disbelief and think, should they have done this? 2002 is getting a bit desperate if they're getting this version of Shawn. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it was a very desperate year, and you are thinking, watching it like, no, I don't really want to watch this. It's getting a bit uncomfortable. That doesn't work if Triple H isn't great at a heat sequence when he wants to do it, you know? He's had his promos, personally, like, they just go on too bloody long. Looks like me sometimes. Like, there's so many, just deathly silent, unexciting, not over matches. Like, that's the thing. Is it over? Okay, I can't dispute it. It's over in that building. It's people, like, in great number, a thing loud enough for me to think, fair enough, it's not for me, but clearly it's working for that audience.
And was like...
There's so many that no other main event level big match wrestler can say that he's stunk up the joint as much as he is. It's just, you can hear it, or rather can't.
Well, right, there's an example in my head of Chris Jericho versus Kevin Owens from WrestleMania 33. And why it's in my head is I was editing a list today, and that stupid deranged old tosser Vince McMahon told them both it was the worst WrestleMania match you'd ever seen. You remember in the documentary, and then he said more to Jericho when Jericho bothered to ask him, because he wasn't that fussed. He knew, just like Kevin Owens knew, that it had been completely killed by losing the belt. It was a good story that they'd told, and it had got taken away from them ultimately. Says Vince, like, hyperbole, but that's the worst WrestleMania match I've ever seen, right? Vince McMahon is going to walk away from that, and he's going to probably apportion equal blame. He might be a bit kinder to Jericho because he's been around earning money longer. We saw what he did with Owens. But Owens goes on, and things end up fine for him. So you imagine he watches it. That's the worst WrestleMania match I've ever seen. Those guys, they're both getting D-pushed. They both suck, whatever. Like, you absolutely could say that about countless Triple H matches. And was he ever going to apportion blame equally? Of course he wasn't.
No.
So he was never even, on all the metrics, by the people that mattered backstage, Vince McMahon and probably others in like an inner circle, of which Triple H was, when he got his trunks back off and into his suit, was back in that inner circle, was never judged fairly. If there's a Scott Steiner stinker, if there's a whoever, it's always going to be, well, we tried, didn't we? Another loser's coming from WCW, and we did our best. Like, no. The only time that equal blame will be apportioned for a match stinking would have been when it would have been against someone like The Undertaker, because Vince would have been like, well, it must have been the fans because you were giving them hell out there, guys. Like, otherwise, if it's Triple H versus insert wrestler, that wrestler's getting... I think of something where, like, a Vladimir Kozlov, Survivor Series 2009
no one's gonna do
horror show, right? A dire match, a dire experience.
I wouldn't count that on my list.
No, I don't hold Triple... Like, that's a dire piece of business. I mean, I will say if it was Brett, it would have been better. I will say if it was Bryan Danielson, it would have been better. Terry Funk, and we're talking goats here, right? A lot of people getting CM Punk, getting that spot, and it's like, they're going to make something out of this. I never once had faith Triple H could. But yet again, you're going to go backstage, and he's going to be like, well, what do you want me to do? And they would have gone, yeah, of course, yeah, I Paul, get your seat back on, let's get to work. Like, and that's another goat thing, right? Like, if you're not out there making guys, you already drop to the tier below, because that's just as you... have your rise, you become the best, and then, well, how good are you at stepping aside and making others as you start to go down? And you kind of refused that at all. In every respect, he kind of refused to even acknowledge a downward slide at points until these latter years. And by then, it was like, well, I can't go the way I used to, so long it is. Like 30 minutes plus it is.
It's finally, I want to talk about your personal goats. It's all subjective, as we've mentioned, and I'm sure people will take that into account when they're in the comment section or on X talking about this podcast. They won't just take a screenshot of the thumbnail and say some bollocks. But because it's all ridiculous, isn't it? Like, we're not going to sit, not just the three of us who do stuff all day long, every single day of the week. We're not going to sit here and say, right, the goat's this person. you're going to say someone, you're going to say someone different, I'm going to say someone different. So it's kind of ridiculous to even say who's the GOAT. We're talking about it in the office. Like, how many wrestlers are there? I don't know how many footballers are there at the same time, but there's like, in terms of football, soccer, you still can't decide. There's still two.
But there's data.
Yeah.
There's like
but even then,
trophies won.
Even then, people would argue it down.
Exactly.
Wouldn't
Yeah. You can't say who's right and who's wrong. But like personally, who's yours? Who's your GOAT?
I've got two. One for that big match, noise, drama, emotion, action. In terms of the big matches, it's Kenny Omega. It's just untouchable. Absolutely untouchable. In terms of who the best wrestler is over the longest span, with the ability to make most opponents look amazing, like, it's Bryan Danielson. Bryan Danielson, his WWE run was spectacular. I prefer his WWE run. I would go AEW run, WWE, ROH, genuinely. And that's sacrilege to some, but I think there's just no one like him in terms of, like, suspending your disbelief. Everything he does look like it hurts. You can feel like he's really, really struggling badly physically in there, or he'll kick your head in more violently than anybody else. Everyone just looks incredible in the ring with him. There are times when you think the amount of jobs he's done. You know, when they say, it's weird. It's like, I kind of agree, because you could have him as champion in AEW, right? The amount of jobs, I always say this about Bryan Danielson. People say, he's lost too often. And he has. Like, he's lost to Hangman Page a lot. And he did a job for Jericho at various points, and like all the rest of it. Everyone thinks, he's doing too many jobs. He's doing too many jobs. And yeah, maybe because he's so good at being the most, like, because he's so good at portraying the best wrestler in the world, and that's part of his gimmick and his act. And there are various points in those matches where people look like they're in agony, they're in trouble. That's like, Danielson's not doing a job here. Look at him. There's no one else who can, in the fiction, make me think, he's winning because he's Danielson. Even though you know before the match, Danielson's going to probably lose this again. You don't want to. Just because he's Danielson, he looks like he's a master in the ring, in the body of a match. You just never think, he's losing. He's just a genius. He's the best.
It's the Danielson, just on the...
He's had more... No, I'm not going to say it.
Just on your point, the point about WWE, when there'll be a wrestler, often it is Danielson, funnily enough, but other wrestlers have said it. They said there's like a weird new trend in Bloodsport, a new trend in wrestling. It's getting over or whatever, and you'll hear wrestlers like, I want to kind of test myself in this strange new trend. Like Lucha Underground was there for a bit, Bloodsport, whatever. The ring's got 6 sides, the ring's a triangle, whatever. Like, that was Bryan in WWE.
Yeah.
Look at the version he thrived in. And it's like, was survived and then thrived in. Look at what that WWE even was.
So glad I was working for What Culture when he had the Lesnar match, and you were just like talking me through all the aspects. I was fascinated.
He's just...
In the building, we were all in the building for Kofi.
Yeah.
What needed to be accomplished there.
Yeah.
That hemp belt of it. Like, a hemp belt in a historic, vitally important WrestleMania match, and who else but Bryan could occupy that spot realistically. I mean... Like, this is the thing. Mine's Brett, right? I don't think I've ever made any real secret about that. And the only one he truly adheres to when we're talking GOAT is, I think he's the greatest ever pro wrestler, right? In every other category, you could argue against it. And I don't think anybody, unless they're having a bad faith row, would suggest he didn't draw. Not in a meaningful way, unless you were in the UK and Germany.
Bit like, marble mouth in the promos.
Yeah, like the promos were unbelievable when they were like, he's an underrated promo for me. He was the guy that cared more about the replication of a sport. When we talk about how wrestling can give you the feeling of your team getting a late winner, Brett took that to extremes because he often you'll watch a footballer or a manager doing a post match and it's not this perfect sort of verbiage, is it? They've either had the match or they're about to have the match. So it's either the nerves or the adrenaline or whatever, and they're just getting it all out there. But they're talking about the contest. They've just been involved with the competition. That was Brett a lot of the time. When he turned it on and when it was really great, it was industry changing. Honestly, frustrated isn't the goddamn word for it. This is, but like that kind of everything changes. That's got a butterfly effect that changes WWE's entire trajectory. Feeds into the Steve Austin match. So yeah, I think he's the best wrestler ever. I don't think anybody did every aspect of pro wrestling ever better than Bret the Hitman Hart. And yet, in a lot of ways that you could sort of quantify this, he falls short. And I don't care. Like, I know what I'm watching when I'm watching Bret, and what's been wonderful about, the points a bit laboured, but the tributes through the Punks and the FTRs and others, but they were the ones that really put themselves at the front of it, was a lot of people going and looking for the first time, because we've talked about this. There was definitely a period where, because of WWE's narratives they wanted to push, Bret was this boring whinger and Triple H was the best of all time. Or probably the more accurate reflection is Shawn was the best of all time, but for me, Shawn's got the matches. I think Shawn's actually in the conversation. But like, there was always this, Bret was good. It's all right. Good night, guy. Montreal. Honestly, that was like, they were happy for that to be out there for years. I
was kind of, fed on that in early days.
You weren't the only one that walked through our doors. And like, then narrative shifted, as they should have done. People went back and looked, and maybe the biggest compliment you can pay is that it started not to matter that something was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It started not to matter that you weren't living through the context of it. You were just watching, and you watched, and Jesus Christ, there it is.
The McGee footage was...
The McGee thing was a big moment for him, and he deserved it. It was flowers, and everything now is clips, and everything now is check out this guy or check out this guy. And like the recommendation list, there is no end to it realistically, because if you're asked, the hardest thing you can be asked often when we get asked questions is like, I need a sampler from Bret 5. Oh God, right, this 5 tweets more like there. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I can try and give you your digest, but the reality is it's all like, he's a Smiths wrestler for me. He kind of came in, everything is goated, and then he was gone. Like, unfortunately, he was gone. But the arenas, the stadiums aren't always there for Bret, and the promos aren't always there for Bret and that. But that's why nobody will ever agree who the GOAT is.
Yeah. Tony D for you?
Mizawa for me, probably. Now, look, like, at the end of the day, like, what a point I'm trying to make is, like, I haven't watched that stuff. I know I should personally pick a Shawn Michaels or probably a Bryan Danielson, but, like, GOAT is subjective. It doesn't have to be, like...
It's The Rock.
It's The Rock. Yeah. It is The Rock. Yeah, we all know what I'm getting to here. Only solidified by what we just lived through at the start of this year.
The best heel runs ever.
The ultimate counterpoint to Triple H.
I'm not going to sit here and go, and here's 10 matches that are better than Bryan Danielson's matches, because you can't do that. It's just a subjective enjoyment of whatever you like.
This is not just you having, like, going to school when WWE was on Channel 4 in the UK and going as a shoot, what about the Attitude Era? He was, for years, the shorthand forum guy for, well, Triple H, you could be a bit more like The Rock, you loser. Be a bit more selfless. Like, understand that you've kind of supposed to leave this in a better place than you found it, rather than
you meant to leave.
Leaving to be fine too. Like the noise that you had in those matches with The Rock. Remember that? Make some. Like The Rock was this guy that put everybody over. He put Steve Austin to shame. We've not mentioned Austin as a GOAT.
Yeah.
Another guy I think is right up there. But yeah, he was a safe WWE main eventer that, like, you could argue, because he really got the art of wrestling as well, didn't he? Like, he sort of had that later into his run, and he's kind of come back and he's done this. Like, Triple H and The Rock are going to be in a foot forever, as evidenced by the Class WrestleMania documentary. That's a power struggle that I never thought I'd get. Like, 24 years after them at their peak, niggling. They're going again. Like, I want to keep watching that. Shawn, when we talk about Triple H, is fascinating to me. I think Shawn gets too much criticism. I think he really is one of the best ever. I think his 90s run is only comparable to Bret's in America.
We're just watching him and Taker, weren't we, the other day in the office?
What a bumper.
Yeah.
And that's one aspect of his game. I think he gets a bit too much stick for me personally, because of the people that copied his style rather than because of him himself. The God era. Sure.
Yeah.
I think what happened with NXT, and he's been involved in some of that creative, and the looking at the hands and the Johnny Gargano and the tribute stuff, has warped the reflection of what was a good... WWE needed him in some of those posts. There was nobody doing it like Shawn in some of those years, least of all Triple H.
But I'm sure this is a conversation that will keep going, as it has done on social media, and I don't think anyone else needs any more encouragement to talk more about it. Anything else we want to say about this?
No. Let's have talked about Triple H too long today.
Watch his 2000 stuff. You'll see it if you don't. If you think he's absolute trash, it is out there.
But yeah, let us know your thoughts on what we've discussed. Let us know your goats in the comment section below, or on X at WhatCultureWWE. Well, actually, you can follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflet at
Michael Hamflet.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
M Sidgwick.
Follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all at WhatCultureWWE. As I said, and if you enjoyed this conversation, we do daily wrestling podcasts, What Culture Wrestling Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts from. But for now, this has been Get the Table. My thanks to Hamflet Sidgwick. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.